Well, good morning. That's probably the high point. I remember my son, after he come out of school, our oldest son got accepted to medical school, and he got the call on a Friday afternoon, and they were to start on Monday. And we took him out to dinner that night, and I said, Kevin, understand, this is probably the high point of the next 10 years of your life. And I can tell you for sure, he would agree that was true, because it was tough stuff. This is an unbelievable place to be doing what we're about to do. And I've talked about this many times over the last, years, but most intensely over the last few months as well too. I've used a term different times that we're at a transition point in corporate governance. And as I've thought about that, it's not correct. We're at an inflection point. Things are changing and changing dramatically. And they're going to. And what better place to be than at Columbia University? Why? Well, what it brings from a history and a knowledge, absolutely. But probably more important is balance in thought and guidance, where people try to understand an environment, look at that environment, study that environment, listen to the constituents that are in that environment that go from investors, analysts, proxy advisors, shareholders, customers, employees, try to deal with global economic changes, geopolitical changes, quarterly earnings, and as declared sometimes in the press, season's earning is starting next week, and shareholders that may ask for and/or demand buybacks or dividend increases. And in all of that, today, we've got a board sitting at the center of that. And the questions are being asked, and rightfully so, what's their role? And how are they performing that role? What should it be? How should it be defined? How should it change, if it should change? How could they do it better? What part do activists play in that? What part do active investors play in that? You'll hear from Bill Nabb at the end of the day. And he would call himself an active investor, not an activist. But we could point to examples where activists have created enormous beneficial change in an organization. We could also point to examples of where that has created horrible outcomes. And so, how do we deal with that? And what should happen? How should we view it? What role can you individually play in it? Each of you in a very different role at the current time, but that'll have a voice in that. And I think the challenge is, how do we have a voice that takes us to a new place in a thoughtful way, in a balanced way, that gives some guidance to what maybe should be the transition? We've lived for decades with boards owning corporate governance. But now with things like proxy access, maybe we're moving into an era of shared governance. And if so, how do you do that? What are the guidelines you follow? And I think the thing that we need to think about as we move into this is that this change can come from within. We can do it to ourselves, or somebody will do it to us. And generally speaking, change is better done if folks like you and others here at Columbia University have an input into that, willing to open up and change in new ways. Things that were uncomfortable last year maybe need to be very comfortable next year. And I think one of the great things we have going for us here, this is named the Millstein Center for Corporate Governance. IRA has been at this for 4 or 5 decades, giving guidance on corporate governance in very different environments than it is today. With the major corporations in this country and around the world. And the amazing part about where we are is that this man is opening up the aperture wider now and looking at it in a new way and saying, is there time for change? Do we need activist boards? Not just activists. And if we did, what would be the result of that? So we don't know for sure exactly where the end point is. We know what the goal is, and that is to help define and build a roadmap for the change that needs to occur, to incorporate all the constituents in that discussion and come to a better place than we are today. And so I think the challenge then is, how do we get on offense? Not on defense, not be reacting to what's going on and to be moving with the current, but rather think our way through it, have discussions, have debates, and that's what we're here for today. You're going to be seeing folks that will have positions. You'll be seeing folks that have different positions. And we're going to encourage you, and do encourage you to put yourself into that and ask questions of those folks and become a part of that dialogue and become a part of the future and how we change things and what we want to do and how we want to do it. So thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time to be with us, and I hope you find that this day will be as energetic as we go through it as we've hoped we planned it to be. Marcel, do you want to come back up?